right, guys, I'm sitting here with Jackson Yeager. We got connected in kind of a funny way. Do you want to tell the story or you want me to?
Through Joey Sauerland. I'm here for a conference, the American College of Sports Medicine. Yesterday, Joey texted me. He's like, "Hey, what's your schedule like tomorrow?" I said, "Oh, I'm pretty open in the afternoon." And he's like, "Okay, well, you're doing a podcast tomorrow." So
I love
we're
it.
here.
Absolutely. Very, very Joey. If you all know him, that's very much him. And that's so cool. I love, like, even in this industry, there's, a way to connect everyone. So it's so cool. I would love to know how are you connected to Joey in the industry?
So I met Joey at the gym. I started working out at the gym that he worked at. So we started working out together, started hanging out. And funny enough, when I met Joey, he showed me a video of USPSA, and
Mhm.
he's like, "I'm trying to get really good at this." And now here we are. He's a multi-time national champion.
That's awesome. So when you met him, he was like in the beginning of his journey.
Yeah, I think he had shot maybe 2 or 3 matches when I met him. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Okay. And you're a shooter as well?
On occasion, I don't have as much time for it since I'm doing research,
Oh my
but
God, yeah, you're in your doctorate. That's so crazy. Yeah,
yes.
so speaking of, oh my gosh, please tell us about yourself.
So I started out college as a Spanish education major. I've
Mhm.
always had a passion for education, but that really wasn't scratching my intellectual itch.
Mhm.
So I shifted from there to a pre-med track,
Nice.
where I realized upon interning in ERs and being in the medical field that, they have a very treat 'em and treat 'em mentality
Yeah.
and a very reactive approach to medicine.
Mhm.
And that's not somewhere where I wanted to be. So I wanted to find a place where I could attack, health from a different angle. So that's where I got into kinesiology and started doing inactivity research.
Nice. Oh gosh, that's fantastic. No wonder he connected us. I told about my whole rant. I dropped out of medical school. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Some of these conversations we've already had, but you guys are gonna hear them like it's the first time. I did not like the lack of holistic approach either.
Mhm.
And my only dream that would ever make medicine make sense for me was to open my own practice and be able to have a dietitian, even a personal trainer, like someone who is kind of specializing in special populations as well as some that were able to work with like more normative populations. And then I kind of got to where I was like, you know what, that is a long track to like have to do something that requires you to also be a business mind and a marketing mind. And if you don't have the capital to like hire that out. So it was one of the reasons I dropped out. And then of course I have like I told you my little spiel before this. I
Mhm.
was like, you must know the story of She Shield before we get started. And he was like, okay. So, but all that to say, I totally respect that, totally get that. How do you feel like your current doctorate is leading to being able to give a more like holistic approach?
Well, the problem that we're having is it's beyond an epidemic. We're at a pandemic at this point. There was a study in 2019 that 81% of adolescents are not meeting globally are not meeting the recommended activity levels. So my thought was, how is this going to impact these kids when they're aging, when they're 25, when they're 50? Is that going to present with increased risk for cardiovascular disease, sarcopenia, things of that nature? So being able to attack the problem at its source rather than reacting to these problems when we see them down the pipeline, will help us, lessen the burden on the healthcare system and improve these individuals' quality of life.
Absolutely. And what made you interested to work with the adolescent population or I know you don't work with them in the lab. We'll get to that. But what made you interested in like starting from the very beginning?
Well, you have to attack a problem at its source.
Right.
If not, then you're just reacting to the symptoms of the problem.
Absolutely. Interesting. Okay, very cool. And so, okay, so you switched over undergrad third year
Yes.
from our first conversation, and then you've done your master's.
Yes, that's
Okay.
I'm finishing that up right now, and I'll be starting my doctorate in the fall.
Okay, what made you want to finish off with a doctorate?
That was really the only path where I felt like I could make a meaningful impact.
Yeah.
And really the impetus for it was I want to have my own lab where I can ask my own questions,
Nice.
and kind of govern, what my lab is doing and how that research gets communicated.
That's wonderful. So something listeners, you may not know this. She Shield is all about. It's not just competitive shooting. It's not just concealed carry, draws from concealment from retention, all the cool stuff that we go into. It's also about being healthy mentally and physically. I think that that is the first line of defense. I had these guest speakers on Ryan Hoover and Amber Stakolinsky in season one, and they kind of coined this term like defensive self and
Mhm.
self defense because if you're not able to, sprint away from an attacker or physically kind of dominate that person, given your physiological predisposition is it's so crazy, like a petite 120 pounder versus like a 300-pound male, then ultimately the fight is just extremely unfair. And of course, that's where firearms come into, but it really does go back to the initial problem, which is a lack of care for our system. And we see that a lot. The biggest example, this is not to be crude, but it's like a lot of people will make fun of like overweight cops, like those that aren't able
Mhm.
to like actually run and fight, when they are intended to be like these protectors of our society. And so to me, it's like, cool, let's attack that systemically. Let's talk about that and bring people on like you that have made that your life's purpose. That's so freaking cool. For those listening that maybe don't understand how like a doctorate works, before we get into the kind of minutia, how would you describe your program?
So, a doctorate in any case is, you're not, a lot of people see them as experts in a certain field, but
Mhm.
really what a doctorate is you become an expert in research. It's a
Right.
degree in conducting research and interpreting research. So that's where, I kind of learned study design and how
Mhm.
to interpret statistics and really dive into what the data is actually telling us.
Right. I love that. I told you before this, I was like, I went and got my master's degree in so kinesiology. Would you go ahead and define that for
It's
listeners?
kinesiology. Kinesthetics is movement. So kinesiology is the study of human movement.
Absolutely. It's a big word. So, like, anytime I say that, I feel really bad. There are disciplines within kinesiology. I did exercise science as my master's degree. And really, the only thing I became, I think, better at by the end was interpreting. Oh my God. Interpreting, apparently not how to say that word, interpreting data, which is incredibly important. We live in a society that kind of tells you what you need, and doesn't really encourage you to be, kind of a skeptic
Mhm.
and a researcher yourself. So I'm really thankful for that degree because it taught me how to like look into data further than just the conclusion of the article piece. We had to like assess everything from the number of people that were assessed in the data to determine its true like application validity outside of the research. And I'm really thankful for that. So I'd love to maybe we start there. By the way, just as you all know, if you actually listen to this, I do not like super prepare these episodes. As you heard, Joey was like, "Hey, you're gonna do this podcast episode." He also told me the same thing, by the way. He was like, "My friend Jackson's coming to town. We're all gonna hang out because I like to host when Joey's in town. I like to get all of our like shooter friends and otherwise together." And he was like, "Before we all hang out, you guys are gonna do an episode. It'd be really good for She Show. I want to listen to it on the plane on the way home." Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's
Just said
exactly what he
that
said.
and like in that tone. That's Joey. So this is not very prepared, but I'm so excited to see where it goes. So for those listening who maybe don't understand the importance of data interpretation, like where could they start to become more of a skeptic on like what they're consuming, what they're consuming both in food and both in like data and yeah.
The first thing you have to consider when you take in any sort of information is the source. So the first thing I do when I read a scientific paper is I go to their funding section and see who funded this. So I've read papers on like, oh, this antioxidant that's found in tea is
Mhm.
incredibly powerful in improving health, and then I go to the funding section and it's funded by a tea company. So then there's some
Gotcha.
bias in the data and how the study was conducted.
Where
So
is that in the article? Like where do I
it's
find that?
usually at the end. So the authors will disclose any financial, what's the word? Financial,
Contribution?
yes,
Yeah,
or conflicts of interest.
there you go.
And so that's the first place that I always look.
Mhm.
The second place I look is the method section. How was this study conducted? Who was it conducted
Mhm.
in? Because that's something you really have to look at in research is, who does this apply to?
Right.
Because maybe the study was conducted in, like a lot of studies are, especially in the exercise science field, in college age males, because research is conducted at universities, so they have the population that they have access to,
Right.
which is typically college age students. And not to disparage females, but there's a lot of hormonal things that can confound data, so it's a lot easier to conduct it in males.
Absolutely. Incredible. Okay, so you look for who is funding it.
Yes.
You look for the who the population is that is
Mhm.
studied on. What else might you look for?
And then how they conducted the study. So what were the time points? What variables did they control? And so there's this term that's thrown around in research called ecological validity, which is how can this conclusion be generalized to the
Mhm.
population? And a lot of that is based on, number one, who was the study conducted in, but also what variables did they control? Because, in order to determine causality, we have to get rid of confounding variables.
Absolutely.
And in doing that, you can sterilize a study so much that it's really not applicable to the general population.
Absolutely. And to break that down further, for those of you listening, if you're like, oh my God, this is like too much for me, think of like doing an experiment with a plant, right? You're testing different soils, perhaps, and you change, plant A versus plant B. If you don't keep the sunlight exposure for plant A and plant B the same, then that's a confounding variable. The sunlight could have affected the growth of the plant if that's your like what you're studying or measuring. So a confounding variable in this case would be the sunlight that was confounding to the type of soil. I like I always talk with people who are like experts in industries, and I always think about like I'll listen to podcasts and I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. So sometimes I like to just be like, all right, guys, let's pause really quick and like, let's isolate this word and let's deepen it a little bit. So
Well, to put it in an exercise context,
please, yeah.
and especially right now, protein has gotten such big news in the media.
Right.
So if you have a training study per se,
Mhm.
and you do, this whole training intervention with these two groups of people, but you didn't track any of their nutrition,
Right.
do you really know if the training was giving that effect or if there was some other variable that was contributing to the variance?
Absolutely. I love that. Is there anything else you look for in a study before we move on to what you're studying? 'Cause
Really, the biggest thing is, are they making any outrageous claims? So if I read the conclusions and they're like, oh, this variable, contributes to this, 1-to-1 ratio. If you increase this, then it increases that, or if you decrease this, then it decreases that.
right.
That you have to put it through basically the bullshit radar
Mhm.
of,
Yeah, I love
is
that.
this really, saying what they're saying it's saying? That was a
Absolutely.
lot, but
No, 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 and I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah, I always tell guest speakers, this episode is about you, so feel free to ramble. And no, I love that very much. Yeah. As far as like reputable sources for people to like, let's talk about, for example, creatine. Creatine's a big one.
Mhm.
So is protein, right? Creatine, monophosphate, the thing that helps you grow big muscles, right? And is being pushed by a lot of marketing efforts because people are trying to sell their supplements, which are not often regulated, whatever. Say someone wants to like look up an article on like how many grams of creatine you should consume a day. Where would they go to do that?
PubMed would be the
PubMed.
place that I
Yeah,
go. So that's
absolutely.
it's a great public access place that they put, they have links to all different journals in there. So you can do keyword searches or things of that nature and then pull up studies. And what I would do is filter it by recency bias.
Mm,
So, look within the past 5 to 10 years,
okay.
because that's going to be, they're going to include in their reference section in all of their introduction, all the previous research that's been done on that topic.
Yeah.
And then the gold standard is meta-analyses and systematic reviews. So look there first. If you're not finding what you're looking for, then you can go to, primary research articles, which is where they actually did the intervention. So
Right.
to describe the difference between that and a review, they didn't actually conduct a study. They just looked at other papers that have done the study and they kind of combined all of that data and drew a conclusion from
Right.
that. So that's where I would look first, especially on something like creatine, which aside from caffeine has been the most researched supplement on the planet.
Sorry. Okay, our audio is working. I was like, holy shit, we've not been recording the audio. I would kill myself. No, I would not kill myself. I can take that out. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
No, so creatine has been researched beyond belief.
Yeah.
Aside from caffeine, the most researched supplement on the planet.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of reviews, a lot of systematic meta-analyses that
Mhm.
have been done on that. So when you read those, what you really have to take into mind is the effect size. And that's something with training studies especially. Like, you look at these different rep ranges for hypertrophy and all this stuff, and you might see like a 1 or 2% increase in hypertrophy. And they say, oh, well, you need to do this.
Right.
This is optimal.
Right.
When in reality, for the average person, we're losing the forest for the trees. You're getting way too specific. We need to just broaden out. And what I always say is the best exercise is the one you'll do.
Yeah. There you
So
go.
you really don't need to try and optimize things. Just move more.
I like that a lot. Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a sister who does competitive salsa dancing, and
Mhm.
she's like, I know I should lift weights. I'm like, yes. Like, are we prone to sarcopenia, especially like women with early onset osteoporosis in a lot of cases? Absolutely. Should you lift weights? Sure. But like, if your schedule right now only permits for you to do like competitive salsa, have you ever seen competitive
I
salsa?
have not.
Oh my God. It's like I would attribute it to, like, sprinting.
High intensity
I just
exercise. Yeah.
absolutely, and then the coordination and there's a lot of, like, isometric holds as well.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things in there. I always try to reassure her. I'm like, "If that's what you'll do and show up to do, then you'll do that." And I've seen, like, this is not to say anything bad about my sister, she's perfect, obviously, but when she moved from Boston to Florida, ironically, even though you think Florida would have, like, more salsa dancing, she didn't find a club that she liked, and she's not moving as much, and she notices that, and she's kinda sad about it, and we've talked about, like, what is something you enjoy, because she comes to me, a weightlifter, who's like, "Hey, like, I know I should be weightlifting." She has this, like, shame associated with it, and I'm like, "Let's back up, like, theoretically, like, we all should be moving, right?
Yes.
So whatever that is, let's do that." I love that, thank you, and if you're someone who listens to ChatGPT, I talk to my ChatGPT. I don't know if you do that, like, I hit the talk button, I'm like, "Let's talk about this real quick." She's like, "Anything, let's go." But what you can do, and tell me if you disagree or add to this however you'd like, anytime I ask Chat something, I ask to put the resources, the cited resources at the bottom of its interpretation. Is there anything else people could do?
What I would look at that is, sometimes ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these large language models, they will make up research articles. So when
Mhm.
they do give you the references, go look at those papers because
Right.
sometimes they don't even exist.
Right, and those are called There's a word for it. It's called like ghost.
Ghost articles or something of that nature. I'm not sure.
Hold on. Oh, hallucinated info. It's
Mhm.
a thing. Like a lot of people don't know this who avidly use ChatGPT. They will make up articles and then it looks legitimate because it's able to do that. Like it's a language learning model.
It'll give you authors, it'll give you a date, a journal that it was published in, and it doesn't even exist.
Absolutely. It's pretty fucking insane. So like have those links populate at the bottom and go check the validity of it. That's like the best thing you can do. And then use the first part of this conversation, those like aspects that you should look for in an article and assess it for yourself. Be your own kind of skeptic. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your research. You work with live mice. That was
I
like one of the
do.
first things Joey told me. He was like, dude, this guy be cutting up mice. And
Well,
before you say anything, um, mice are model species, right? So a model species is a correct me if I'm wrong, I've been out of my master's for a while. But it's a species that we found to be very representative of the human body without having to like take a human and take a muscle biopsy from
mhm.
them. So is that right? Would you want to add anything to that?
That's correct. I mean, for the general audience, that's about as much as they need to know.
Right,
So we use model organisms because of a few different reasons. So
right,
the reason that we use mice is their brain chemistry and their genetic makeup is very similar to humans.
right.
But the reason that I use mice is because of their lifespan. So
Mhm,
if I want to do a longitudinal aging study
mhm.
in humans, that takes a human lifetime to do.
Right.
So a mouse in the lab will live, upwards of 32 or 36 months. So I can do an entire lifelong aging study within 3
Oh,
years.
that's crazy. Yeah, that's a good point. Gosh, I have been out of it for a while. Okay, so what is your research thesis?
So I look at early life activity levels
Mhm.
and how that impacts the aging trajectory. So right now I'm working on an NIH-funded study looking at inactivity during a 2-week period in these mice, which
Mhm.
they're 3 to 5 weeks old. So it's right after they're done weaning, so they're no longer dependent on their mother.
Okay.
What that would equate to in a human is roughly 6 months of activity or inactivity between 6 months of age and 2 years of age.
So
So in a toddler,
okay.
and so we put them in different levels of activity,
Mhm.
and then afterwards we age them up to 6 months of age, so roughly 25, 30 years old as a human.
Right.
And we look at their physical function, and then we look deeper into the actual molecular things that are going on within the muscle and the structure of the muscle itself.
Incredible. Oh gosh, I was just telling him excuse me, I chose to do biochemistry research with a kinesiology degree, which my what's it called? The advisors were like, "Why did you do this? Like, we've never had anyone do this. Like, kinesiology research is so much cooler. If you're an undergrad or you're thinking about going to college, like, don't do I worked with E. coli, okay? At some point, like, you're talking to it, it doesn't talk back, and you're like, "Shit, mice don't talk back here, I guess."
They don't listen either.
No, yeah, I don't yeah, you mentioned, like, you've gotten bitten
Yes,
before.
they bite you. I mean, they're scared of you.
Yeah,
And what we do with testing is we try to leverage their instincts
right.
to get them to do the things that we want to do. So, for instance, when we test grip strength,
Yeah,
we put them on, think of like a cookie cooling rack.
okay.
We put them on there and they want to grab on and hold on as tight as they can. And
Interesting.
then we pull them until they let go.
Oh my
And then we can
goodness.
measure their max force when they let go. And that gives us their grip strength.
This is so this is, like, outside of my wheelhouse. I don't even know like, I'm at this point where I'm like, I don't even know what question okay, so tell me this, how long have you been doing this research?
This project has been going on now for about two
Oh,
years.
fantastic.
I've been in research now for about 4 years. So
Oh
I
my
started
gosh.
off with a human inactivity study. That was looking at short-term inactivity.
Okay.
So in human studies, the way we do inactivity is the most extreme form is bed rest. So
Okay.
there's been bed rest studies, 90 days,
Mhm.
120 days of people being in a bed. They pay those people very well to do those
Right.
studies.
Yes, I've heard.
They also do things like limb immobilization,
Mhm.
or they'll put people on crutches, just anything they can do to make the muscles inactive.
Interesting.
But one of the biggest ones is step reduction.
Okay.
So you might take someone who usually gets 10,000 steps per day, and they'll take them down to 1,000 or 1,500. So like a 90% reduction in their activity level. But our question was, well, what about a more modest reduction in activity? So somebody who maybe just for a period of time they're becoming less active for whatever reason,
Right.
how is that impacting their health? So specifically what we were looking at is glucose control.
Okay.
And so how is this affecting their risk for type 2 diabetes, things of that
Mm.
nature? So what we did was we had a baseline week of activity where we collected nutritional data, accelerometry, which gives us their activity, not only their activity, but their sedentary behavior. So how long are they sitting? How long are they lying down? We can get
Mhm.
their sleep data from that.
Okay.
Then we also attached a continuous glucose monitor to them so we can see their glucose levels throughout the 24-hour cycle throughout the entire week.
Fantastic.
At the 7-day mark, we gave them an electric scooter and told them, hey, whenever you normally would walk, ride this instead.
These
And
are people.
Yes.
Oh my god, guys, I'm so sorry.
No,
I was
we
like,
can't give a mouse an
I
electric
was wait,
scooter.
I'm so sorry. I was like, hold on a second. Okay, yep, keep going.
These were people. So we reduced their activity by about 30%. So
Okay.
that was the novelty of this study, was a very modest reduction in their activity.
Yeah.
And then we returned them to normal activity after that, or at
Right.
least we told them to.
Okay.
And what we saw was a increase in their average glucose throughout the day,
Mhm.
but also an increase in their glucose variability. So
Interesting.
how tightly their body was able to control their glucose levels throughout that week.
Okay.
And the most interesting thing to me was that if you took somebody who was inactive
Mhm.
prior to giving them the scooter, when we gave them the scooter, they became more active. Our thought for that
Interesting.
was likely it got them outside and it got them moving more. So we actually had to exclude a lot of our participants because they didn't, the
Yeah.
study didn't go how we wanted it to
Right.
go. So we were in those that did reduce their activity. We were successful in reducing it by about 30%, which was the novelty of that study.
That's so interesting. This is a study you did before the current.
Yes, this was when I was in my undergrad.
Oh wow. See, guys, I freaking worked with E. coli. I'm so mad at myself. Skin cell regeneration was cool, but also like when people would ask me what I did, and I was like, I am testing a triple mutant of the fibroblast growth factor. Please change the subject. I cannot explain much of what I'm doing. No, this is so awesome. Yeah, gosh, so cool. And by the way, back to your doctorate degree really quick. For those that don't know, NIH is the
National
National
Institute of Health.
Institute of Health. So for them to be funding you all, that's like so cool. You have to
It's
receive a
a
grant.
yes, it's a long process.
Yeah.
So you send in the grant to get graded. It gets graded on an impact factor, and then they set a number for that. And if they, however much funding they have, they'll set a cutoff line.
Yeah.
And any studies that had an impact factor good enough,
Yeah.
they get funded. And those that didn't, they'll usually send them back with revisions, and you can send them in for the next cycle to possibly get funded.
That's incredible. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we said that because of course, I was like, yes, the NIH, yes, yes, yes. I had a friend who was trying to get a grant from them. She was in some type of neuro lab. Couldn't tell you what she was doing, just as much as I had trouble going back to mine. But yeah, it was a lengthy process, and she was always like, I just fingers crossed because like otherwise we can't do this study. So, sorry, back to your undergrad. What did you end up finding?
Well, what we found was, like I said, the increase in glucose variability, an
Okay.
increase in the average level of glucose, and then they were able to recover during that following week.
Okay.
What would be interesting to see is if we were able to stretch that out longer. So
Mhm.
if that modest reduction in activity maybe went on for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or even months at a time.
Right.
When someone, say a college athlete,
Mhm.
stops exercising as much as they were, what's happening to their body during that
Right.
time period?
Absolutely. So I'm gonna sound really dumb, but like hopefully someone listening is like wondering about this. So as far as like glucose tolerance, can you explain that a little bit for those listening?
Yes, so when you eat carbohydrates, no matter what carbohydrate it is, ultimate fate of that is going to be glucose in your blood.
Right.
And that glucose is used for energy. The largest glucose sinks that we have are our skeletal muscle, which we use to move. In the average person, that makes up somewhere between 25 and 40% of their body mass. So a large proportion of who you are was made to move.
Absolutely.
And when you don't move, that glucose stays in your blood. And the way that we measure that is through A1C,
Mhm.
HbA1c, which is hemoglobin. And so we see how much of that is glycated. And what that gives us is an average of your glucose control over the past 3 months.
Mhm.
The cutoffs for that is if you're over 6, I believe it is, you're
Mhm.
pre-diabetic, and then, or that might be diabetic 5 point something. I'm not
It
super,
also
I'm not a
changes with
glucose
time,
researcher.
right?
Yes.
Like it's one of those things you have to like stay on top of because they adjust it year to year
Mhm.
typically. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so controlling your glucose is huge for your risk for type 2 diabetes, and moving is one of the number one ways that you can dispose of that glucose.
Absolutely. So how did you control for those that had a genetic predisposition to diabetes and
Well, we did not include anyone in the study who had any sort of metabolic disease. So we
okay.
did ask, them to go to their doctor or get any sort of records on, are they susceptible to diabetes? Do they have an immediate family member with type 2 diabetes?
Mhm.
Those types of things. So if they did, then they were excluded from that study.
Okay, interesting. That's super cool because that would have been confounding.
Yes.
Yes, yes, very cool, very cool. That's awesome. Okay, so when you left this, you defended your thesis successfully, it sounds like.
Not yet. I'll
Not
be
yet.
working on that in July.
Oh my gosh, no way. Okay, sorry about that. I'm getting like the timeline
You're all good.
confused.
It's
Okay.
confusing to me as well. So
Sure. So is this current study you're doing in your doctorate an extension of this?
I'll be working on something adjacent but different. So in my
Okay.
doctorate, I'll be working on critical injury. So
Okay.
looking at recovery from burn injury and from sepsis.
Oh, wow.
And what I'm bringing to that lab is my experience with functional data. So
Right.
testing we'll still be working with mice
Right.
because it's a good thing, but
Mhm.
we're not allowed to burn people just for the
Right.
sake of research.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll have to do it in mice, and so
Right.
I'll be able to test their physical function as well as some other molecular things that are going on.
Okay, so you're currently I am so
I'm
sorry.
currently working on activity,
On
but
activity.
I'll be shifting towards critical injury.
Okay, so good to know. And did you get to choose this route?
I did. So
Okay.
I found somebody who was working on something that I thought was very interesting,
Yeah.
contacted them and said, "Hey, I'd really like to work in your lab," and
Right.
had an interview, and we're moving on from there.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I remember, just as a little aside, I don't really get to talk about this on the podcast much, but the research professor I was studying under had a diabetes research lab. He had a cancer research lab and a skin cell regeneration lab, and all the other ones were full basically. So I got into skin cell, and I was
Mhm.
like just thankful to be in his lab because anyone that went in his lab got to medical school.
Gotcha.
But if I could go back, I would totally find something that interested me. I mean, there were, like, human participants working in climate control pods, like, doing exercise and then, like, data being measured before and after, and I was like, "Ah, that is so cool." It's like this you get to work in this room with the pod and, like, watch people work out and, like, test them and work with people, so, no, it's super interesting. Okay, cool. So, where are you currently at as
Miami University in Ohio.
okay, and as far as, like, the, kind of, like, what you have in your foreseeable future with research, like, where are you at in that timeline? Like, where do you hope to kind of, like, end, I guess, or
My end goal is to be a faculty member at a university, so to
yeah,
have my
okay.
own lab and be able to ask my own questions.
Yes, okay, that's so cool. And did that experience come from, like, being a research student and, like, wishing you could have asked other things, or is it just like
Well, I've always been curious.
yeah,
And so, when you're an undergrad or even a master's student, PhD student, you're working under who we call a principal investigator. And so you're doing things that are aligned with their line of research,
mhm,
which is great. It's still things that I'm interested in, but
right.
I don't get to govern where the lab is headed, which is something that I want to do in the future.
Absolutely. Do you have any, like, questions you would like, in mind that you would ask?
I'm very interested in just aging and
Mhm,
function throughout the lifespan. My grandparents were very frail towards the end of their life.
yeah,
They had dementia and Alzheimer's, and
yeah.
so using exercise as a stimulus to combat those things
Yes.
is something that I'm very passionate about.
Oh, dude, same. So my dad is like a crazy workout nut, and my mom, she suffers from extreme neuropathies in her feet, so it's really hard for her to walk around. I even have them a little bit in my 40s. They're really embarrassing, but I know, dude, it's awful. And like sometimes, like I will literally be like, I don't want to walk today because
Hmm.
I'm struggling. It's real, and a lot of people don't understand that. Um, I think when I was younger, I would hear about an elderly person falling and then they would die. And I'm like, oh my God, so many people are falling from dying. It's not that. It's the inactivity. It's the lack
Yes.
of use of the muscles. And it's kind of crazy.
Well, something that came out in 2011 by Douglas Patton Jones was he kind of coined this term, the catabolic crisis model. So what that means is if you think about function across the lifespan, we see this curve in early life of rapid growth and development and increase in muscle mass and function, and it peaks in early adulthood. And that peak, that area under the curve, we call
Mhm.
the physiological reserve.
Okay.
And so that's kind of your protection against decline, because as we age, I'm sure you can see older people, they have less muscle mass, they're not
Right.
as strong, they're not as fit.
Yes.
That just happens with aging.
Right.
And so maximizing that peak in early life is so important.
Interesting.
But what happens with the catabolic crisis model is that when someone who's older, they undergo an injury or they get sick and they get hospitalized, catabolism is the breakdown. So they start to lose muscle mass and function. And when they get out of the hospital, they never quite get back up to where they were previously.
Yeah.
And then it happens again, and they
Right.
don't get back up to that point, and it starts to compound. And so that's what the catabolic crisis model was kind of adjusting the way that we thought about aging. We kind of
Right.
thought about it as this gradual decline, but
Mhm.
really it happens in sharp instances that start to compound. And so with my research looking at early life inactivity
Mhm.
is the thought that maybe this catabolic crisis model, by lowering this physiological reserve, by these children being inactive,
Mhm.
that catabolic crisis model sort of shifts towards earlier in life. So these kids might be, more at risk for sarcopenia or premature aging, we call it. So when they're 30, they might look 50
Mhm.
or have the function of a 50-year-old. So
Right.
being able to combat that is super important.
Oh my goodness, this is so freaking cool. Dude, I had no idea. Like, we chatted a little bit before this. I don't know if you guys can probably not. I hope my
Yeah.
Adobe podcast enhancer is taking care of this, but the guys are like all like joking and sounding off in the other room. I think they're playing Cards Against
I
Humanity.
think so, yeah.
We'll probably jump into that game after this. God bless. But with all that said, no, this is so interesting for to apply this to kind of a macro scale to say the listener. Now that we know your background and your passions, which is again so very cool. Thank you for sharing them. For those listening who are maybe they're inactive, they're people that haven't really ever gotten a start. Maybe they're listening and they're saying, I wasn't active as a kid up until now. I'm in my 30s. What am I going to do? What would you say to that individual listening who's like wanting to maybe start that journey?
I would say that anything is better than nothing.
Right.
You see sort of a J curve
Mhm.
with your benefits from activity. So obviously, the more activity you do to a certain point, we
Right.
don't want to be running marathons every day.
Right.
But you start to see benefits in your health the more activity you do. But you see the most benefit early on. So you'll
Interesting.
see more of a benefit going from nothing to something than you will going from something to doing a little bit more.
Absolutely. And we just talked about the importance of training in a discipline that you enjoy. For example, my sister in salsa dancing. For someone listening who's like, I've actually never even thought about a physical activity I enjoy, where would you say they should even start?
You can start by walking. You can pick up pickleball. Anything that gets you moving is great. It could be gardening. It could be, if you want to do a project around the house, it could be anything.
Absolutely. And something I remember from my master's is cyclic exercise. And I always thought it was interesting. It's called cyclic exercise, even though it doesn't mean bicycle work. In fact, bicycle work isn't like a good example of even cyclical. Like
Mhm.
you can get some like osteoblast activity through that, but it's correct me if I'm wrong, dude. It's been a while, okay? But it's exercise where you are kind of impacting the bone
Yes.
to stimulate osteoclast activity, which is breakdown
Mhm.
of bone,
It's building a bone.
and then osteoclast.
You're right. Osteoclast, breakdown of bone.
Breakdown. Okay,
Osteoblast. Yeah.
goddamn. I was like, dude, come on. Oh, shit, I cannot be
They're
that
very
wrong.
similar
They
words.
are. They
There's only
are.
one letter different.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It is. It is. I know. I don't even remember how I remembered it. I was just like, how did I remember it? I don't know. Blasto is the building up
Mhm.
of those bone cells. Yes, yes, yes. This episode of She Shield is brought to you by Right to Bear. You've probably heard me say that self-defense is more than simply carrying a firearm. It's awareness, avoidance, and preparation for anything that is to come your way. And that's why I'm partnering with Right to Bear. They stand by defenders like you and me. You'll receive benefits like expert witness support, psychological care, gun replacement, and even protection for other lawful self-defense tools like pepper spray, knives, and even your hands and feet if you have to use them in a struggle. What sets Right to Bear apart is that they are dedicated to education and immediate legal response. In case you do ever have to protect yourself, you have access to a 24/7 attorney-answered emergency hotline so that you are never alone. What I love most, though, has to be the personal connection that Right to Bear will have with you as a member. For example, Frank, the president of Right to Bear, will give you a personal phone call when he hears about a claim being filed. That level of care in the industry is extremely rare. If you carry, train, and believe in thinking ahead to protect yourself and your family, consider getting a membership with Right to Bear. If you use my code FIT4FIA10, you will get 10% off your membership, and the link to access this and to learn more is located in the show notes of this episode, which are the notes below the title. Protecting yourself and your family should not leave you defenseless afterwards. Stay safe and stay vigilant with Right to Bear. So for those listening who are like looking for like, okay, write me exactly how I should get started. I don't want to start walking. I maybe want to do something a little bit more impactful. What would you recommend to that
I
individual?
would recommend finding somebody who, is a certified personal trainer. Find a dietitian if you want to work on your nutrition, somebody who has had education in this space. Now, what I would really like to know on the subject of nutrition is the difference between a dietitian and a
Oh,
nutritionist.
geez, I want to shift to this anyways.
Anybody on the street can be labeled as a nutritionist,
Mhm.
but a dietitian has to undergo. They have to right now. They have to get a master's degree. They have to do thousands of hours of clinical rotations.
Mhm.
They have to pass a board certifying exam. So finding a registered dietitian is super important if you want to work on.
Oh my gosh, did I say dietitian or did I
I
say
believe you did say
nutritionist? Good,
dietitian.
thank
Yes.
God when I was talking so, but but I didn't know that exact difference.
Mhm.
I work with a woman who's a metabolic specialist. She's in, gosh, she's incredible. I currently have a lot of thyroid issues, like
Mhm.
Hashimoto's, and I haven't really talked about it on my platform because it's one of those things people are like, shoot more guns, we don't care about this. Um, I've been really thankful to work with her because I pay her literally for the input on my on that Hashimoto's again, which is thyroid related, and it's just such a niche topic. And like Western medicine,
We're very reactive to things. Yes.
absolutely. You talked about people having these cataclysmic occurrences and then not training after that, and a big part of that is like their doctors don't talk to them about that.
Mhm.
Even like PMDR, oh God, is that right? Physical medicine rehabilitation. Is that right?
I don't know the acronym, so
Physicians for Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. I thought that that was going to be the field of medicine I went into. So I went and like shadowed all these PMDR doctors, all overweight, all very honestly like incredibly just underwhelmed with with their path. I think they thought they were going to get into that more,
Mhm.
and these weren't people that practiced health. Part of me wanted to go in and like be the change, but then I also viewed how the patients kind of viewed the physician. They just wanted the kind of input of like kind of like pain medicine, referrals to physical therapy, and then just kind of like getting booted out the door from there and getting clearance to go back to work and things like that. There wasn't a lot of support of like preventative health and things like
Mhm.
that. Where the fuck was I going with that? Hang on, PNDR, Western medicine, dietitian. Okay, so let's back up. Sorry. For someone starting a health journey and they're just focused on the gym aspect, which is so like common,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people are like, I just need to work out more. What would you say to the person who's maybe wanting to start this like nutritional journey? Where should they start?
Uh, Contacting a registered dietitian would be great. However, not everybody has the resources to do that. So,
Right.
you see a lot of fad diets out there.
Mm-hmm.
Carnivore is one, keto is another. What I would say is stay away from anything that is drastic change. So, elimination of an entire food group, or only eating this certain type of thing. Balance is the key in nutrition. Balance and moderation. It's all over the space right now, but the first law of thermodynamics is that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you
Right.
can't get calories from nowhere. So to lose weight, you need to be in a caloric deficit, things of
Right.
that nature. But balance, we don't want to be just eating meat. We want to get plenty of fruits and vegetables in. We don't want to be just eating bread or eliminate bread entirely. Carbs aren't the bad guy. Carbs
Right.
aren't are what make you fat. It's the excess calories. And the reason that people get rid of carbohydrates and they lose weight so fast is number one, glycogen is stored in your muscles, and with every gram of glycogen that you store 3 grams of water. So that drastic weight loss that you see in that first, couple weeks of doing keto,
Mm-hmm.
that's likely from glycogen leaving your muscles, and you're losing a lot of water weight.
Interesting.
Also, carbs are extremely easy to overeat. They're hyper palatable. So if you've got bread at the table before a meal at a restaurant, you're going to eat maybe the equivalent of a loaf of bread that you would never do at home.
Absolutely.
It's super easy to get that stuff down, and it's not super filling. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons why with keto and with carnivore, people lose weight so fast, is because they're not eating as much, and protein is super satiating. So when you eat a lot of protein, you don't feel as hungry, and it keeps you fuller for longer. So
Absolutely.
the reality is those people are just eating less food, which is why they're losing weight. There's nothing magic about eating more protein or eating more fat. It's just we're eating less calories.
Absolutely. I used to be terrified of carbs. I think that's just like a normal thing, especially for women. Just saying, we're told to like they are the devil.
Mhm.
And then I learned about simple versus complex carbs. For
Mhm.
those that maybe don't know, how would you kind of explain it?
Well, it can be measured in something called the glycemic index.
Mhm.
So, when you eat a carbohydrate, how fast and how high does it spike your blood sugar? So,
Right.
a complex carb will do that slower, and all that has to do is based on the bonds of how those glucose molecules are attached to one another.
Right.
A complex carb, it just takes you longer to break it down, which
Right.
is why that glucose spike is lower. But it might keep your glucose elevated for a little bit longer.
Mhm.
One thing with controlling glucose after a meal is walking is an incredible tool. So, if you eat a large meal or a lot of carbohydrates, if you take a walk after, it will really reduce how high your glucose is spiked.
Absolutely. And if you're wondering an example, I love a good sweet potato. I have sweet potatoes in almost every meal. Like I'm surprised I'm not like orange, although I'm super pale. So I've been hoping to like over time, like I would turn like a little bit more orange and like look a little tanner. It's not working so far, but I'm gonna keep at it. You know what I mean? I love like like ground beef, ground turkey. I like to mix up my protein sources. That's something my coach has been trying to like help me do because I was eating like the same meals every day, and she's like, "Cool, what if we did a little salmon, a little bit of turkey?" Anyway, that has to do with, like, being vegetarian a lot of my life and then discovering beef, and I was like, "This shit is so good." But, if you're looking to, incorporate carbs in a better manner, like, start with looking up substitutes for, like and examples of simple versus complex carbs. What would you gosh, what is a good example of a simple carb?
A simple carb could be something like white bread,
Absolutely.
or something like white rice.
So
Something that's very starchy,
yes.
can elevate your glucose very quickly.
Okay, so why in bodybuilding this is kind of niche, just feel free to be like, "Let's not" I don't know. Why is there so much white rice and, like
Rice and
beef.
chicken?
Yeah, rice and chicken.
Because it's easy.
Right,
Because the carbs are really easy to count, the macros are really easy to count, and it's a
right,
super easy food to prep,
absolutely.
and there's really no thinking involved.
That's a good point. Okay, that's so good to know. Yeah, I've always kind of wondered that. I don't know. Sweet potato is not hard, by the way. If you're like, I don't want to cut potatoes, get frozen sweet potato from the store. It's a little bit of an upcharge. Like, obviously, you're gonna be able to buy a ton more just like sweet potatoes, but I pop them in the air fryer and then I cook them in a little bit of olive oil with like Creole salt, pepper, and it's my favorite dish ever. I throw a little cinnamon in there in the morning, and
Oh.
then they're like a little sweet with
Mhm.
the like eggs, and like if you like a little sweet in your morning, cinnamon cooks up super well in olive oil, and then you can even cook it, have you done this? Coconut oil,
Yes.
cinnamon, and then if you want, you can put a little honey in there, and, like, the honey will actually, like, cook into the potato a tiny bit.
Start to caramelize, it's
It's so
fantastic, yes.
fantastic. Oh my god, yes. Yeah. Gosh, so
But
good.
things to note with something like sweet potatoes is or even, spinach or anything of that nature, it's quality, yes, but you have to watch your quantity as well. Because if
Absolutely.
you ate, 4,000 calories of sweet potatoes during the
Yes.
day, you're still going to gain weight. It doesn't matter
Absolutely.
how nutritious the food is if
Yes.
you're eating too many calories.
Absolutely. Something that I'd love to bring up that a lot of people think is just for people and that are just trying to, like, bodybuild is, like, MyFitnessPal calorie
Mhm.
counters, and, um something a distinction that I'm so thankful that I know is, like, the calorie to, like, gram ratio of, like, protein, carbs, and fat, and alcohol, by the way. A lot of my clients, when I was a personal trainer, they'd be like, "Well, I drank, but it's calorie-less. It said that on the bottle." I'm like, "Actually, there are
7
7
calories
calories
per
per
gram.
1 gram of alcohol." And they'd be like, "Holy shit." I'm like, "Yeah, fat is 9, protein and carbs are 4." Is that
Mhm.
correct? Have they changed that yet?
No, that has not been
Just kidding,
changed.
I'm totally kidding. Yeah, and so, what you can do is, like, use these apps to, like, track what you're currently eating. If you're like, "I have no idea where to start," don't go to those, like, crazy extremist diets. Go and, like, track what you're eating. You'll be surprised. What I normally find is I am eating way too little protein, way too much fat, which that's, there's a balance to be had
Mhm.
with carbs and fats, like, that's a whole topic. And then usually, like, my carbs are right on, like, I don't overdo carbs because I have that, like, natural horn fear of,
Yes.
like, eating too many carbs and get, like, fat as a woman, which is, like, not allowed, societally, but yeah. Do you ever do that? Do you ever, like, track what you're eating?
I have before, but I tracked for a long time because I was into bodybuilding, and what
Yeah.
I found is after doing it for a while, you get a general idea of how
Right?
many calories are in things, how much protein.
Yes.
What I would stay away from is tracking for a very long time because people can get obsessed with those
I have
numbers.
no idea what you're talking about.
And that can lead to eating disorders and things of that nature.
Yes.
So, getting a good feel and listen to your body. When you're
Yeah.
eating whole foods like that and satiating foods, when you're full, stop eating.
Absolutely.
And eat balanced meals throughout the day. 3 meals a day is a great place to start. If you can't get your required protein in or
Mhm.
the right amount of protein in with 3 meals, then maybe have 4 or 5, but make the meals smaller. Just keep yourself full, but not too full throughout the day.
Absolutely. And how would you speak to, like, being a skeptic while you're in the store, like reading ingredient labels? Like, what do you look for as someone who's so well versed in this?
You hear this a lot, but staying on the outside of the grocery store and sticking to whole foods. So the fewer the ingredients in your food, the better. And foods that you can see the ingredients of are super important. Now,
Agreed.
yes, granted that it can be a little bit more difficult to prepare those meals, just
Right.
time consuming.
Right.
But what you'll find is it's really hard to eat too many calories when you have mostly whole foods in your meal, especially if you're getting plenty of fiber in and plenty of protein. It's really hard to eat too much food that way.
Absolutely. Could you go ahead and talk about fiber a little bit? It's left out in the discussion. You saw about proteins, carbs, and fat, but, like, where does fiber come in?
Fiber comes in, it's super important, and what we found is there's really no upper limit to what's good.
Okay.
I think the recommendation for men is somewhere around 25 grams of fiber per day, and
Mhm.
for women, it's a little bit higher.
Mhm.
But eating fiber in every meal is very important. It keeps your, and not to be too crass, but it keeps your bowel movements regular.
Absolutely. No, no,
It keeps you
yes.
very full for longer. And it's super, super good at, there's two different types of fiber. There's soluble and there's insoluble.
Mhm.
So insoluble fiber is the things that you think of, so like celery, the skins on a potato, things of that nature. So we can't break that down,
Right.
which is the biggest thing about fiber. Then there's also soluble fiber, which is those are all your fiber supplements. So what happens is the insoluble fiber kind of creates this meshwork in your digestive tract that can kind of grab things and help
Right.
drag it through. And soluble fiber creates this gel that traps all the water soluble things within that meshwork and helps push it through the digestive tract.
Absolutely. Could you give examples of soluble versus insoluble?
A insoluble fiber would be things like your root vegetables, so carrots, celery. Insoluble fiber would be things like Metamucil, supplements of that nature. Yeah.
Right. And for those that are, maybe they're doing the, like, I think Miralax is a good example of over the counter, like, a fiber supplement.
So Miralax is an osmotic laxative. So what
Okay.
it does is it draws water from your body into the digestive tract to
Right.
help increase the bulk and help it move through.
Okay, and how would you compare that to a more natural form of fiber?
There's really not that much of a difference, but
Mhm.
what you need to focus on is a balance between those two things. You
Right.
don't want to just be getting all of your fiber from a soluble form, which is the easiest way to get it through those supplements. We want
Yes.
to be eating things that have fiber in them.
Absolutely, and speaking of supplements, one of the craziest things, when I started, becoming an influencer, I started my page as a fitness page. It was
Hmm.
for Fia. Now I just say it's what fits for me, and that gives me, like, a fun thing to say to the critics online, like, "Well, too bad you don't like this. It's what fits for me," if it's, like, a gun choice or something. But it really started as a fitness page, and I got reached out to by a ton of supplement brands. It's like it's an incredible marketing just
Hmm.
thing. What would you say, like, the biggest problem is with, like, regulation over supplements used?
Well, the FDA doesn't do a lot of looking into them. So if you are going to take supplements, you want to get something that's tested by a third party.
Right.
So I off the top of my head, I can't name any of the organizations that do that, but
Sure.
if you look that up, there will always be something on the label
Mhm,
of the supplement that says, "Oh, this was I think NPC might be one of them.
mhm.
This is something that's been tested." And what they're doing is they're saying this supplement contains what they say it contains in the amounts
Oh.
that they say are in there.
I've never known what third party tested means. I've actually encouraged people to do that without knowing
Mhm.
exactly what it means. I just kind of was like, okay, cool. Someone else is looking at it. Perfect. Check. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's interesting. There's actually a creator I follow. Her name is um well, her username, that's the most important thing if you're gonna look up. It's Health Illy, so it's Health ILLIE. She's actually come on the podcast and she has a storefront, right?
Hmm.
And she breaks down all of these supplements that are like good versus bad, third party tested versus not. Now that I know what that means. And also ingredients. She breaks down the ingredients and she's someone like today I was ordering some electrolytes and I ordered some, I got some chips for the party tonight and I was like, cool, some, I'm gonna get some electrolytes, and I went to her page, and all of the ones that were available at Smith's were the ones that she was like, "Hey, don't get these."
Hmm.
They have these, like, natural flavors, which often isn't disclosed. That's one of the reasons I like Spindrift. We're not sponsored, by the way. This is not to say, like, we're sponsored, but Spindrift always puts, their ingredients there's no natural flavors. It's carbonated water, raspberry puree, which, like, cool, take it or leave it, and lime juice and 0 added sugars. There's no, like, natural flavors. That's something that is really interesting to me. It's almost in everything now, even things that are, like, they look like they could be whole foods, but then you'll look and it's, like, added natural flavors, and it's insane. Is there anything you wanna say on that? That's just, like
On the supplement note, what I would say is things like vitamins. What you want to be really careful of is, vitamins are great. They're
Right.
things that we need in our diet. But a lot of the vitamin supplements, like say zinc, for example,
Mhm.
you can find a zinc supplement that is, the one pill that you might take is way over the upper limit of what you're supposed to have for the day.
Right.
So be very careful with those types of things.
And for I've always heard at least that most supplements, zinc is technically hold on, I have to back up. Zinc is technically an inorganic compound? Like,
It's a mineral.
it's a mineral.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. So, as far as, like, the body's ability to excrete an excess amount of it, it's not as readable as, like a vitamin C.
Correct, which is
Okay.
water soluble.
Okay, yes. Okay, so that's why.
Mhm.
Okay, could you break that down for the listeners that maybe have no idea what we just said?
Yes, so within your vitamins, the way to remember it is A, E, D, and K
Mhm.
are fat soluble vitamins.
Mhm.
So what
The
believe
panic.
it but believe it or not, my high school health teacher, the way she had us remember it is that if you're fat, you might need an AED. Okay. Yes.
Oh,
So
nice.
AED and K, your risk for toxicity goes way up because
Interesting.
those things can get absorbed and then stored in your fat cells.
Oh,
And so as your fat starts to break down, those things get released back into the body, and you can develop some toxicity from those.
interesting. Whereas
Whereas the rest of the vitamins, like vitamin C, vitamin B, those are all water soluble, which
right.
any excess that you have will be excreted.
Oh, that's so good to know. I need to stop telling people that they'll just be excreted. But don't get me wrong, I'm not personal training anymore. I never claimed to be a dietitian. The only thing I did with my clients was like had them track their macro nutrients, right?
Hmm.
Their protein to fat to carb and alcohol ratio. A lot of them are like drinkers. And
Hmm.
again, they did that like 0 calorie thing, which was really interesting. Why does alcohol say that? So
I
weird.
don't know, because like a shot of vodka, there's nothing else in there but the alcohol,
Right.
but it's got like 90 calories in it.
Right. Right. Which is comparably low to
Hmm.
like some other alcohol options out there. So some
But if
people
you're having, 6 to 8 drinks that have vodka in them, that's, 700 calories worth of vodka,
absolutely
which is hard to outwork.
right. Right. Because okay, remind me, is it alcohol dehydrogenase that is one of the enzymes that is
Yes, in the
responsible
liver
for
that breaks it down.
fat degradation?
Mhm.
So your body doesn't have like correct me if I'm wrong. I'm, like, so nervous to, like, say something
I'm
wrong.
not an expert in this field
No,
either,
totally
so
fair, totally fair. I had this biochem professor before the weekend, every Friday in class, we would talk about alcohol and the like, how it affects the body on a biochemical level,
mhm.
and he would do, like, this fear-mongering thing, and he'd be like, "How many of you are trying to lose fat in here?" We'd all raise our hands, we're like, "We work out, we're healthy," and he'd be like, "Cool, the same enzyme that breaks down alcohol breaks down fat, so if you drink this weekend, it's going to literally, like, push the
It'll decrease your fat oxidation levels, yes.
Exactly, and that was always something like, I would go to the bars with my friends, I'd be like, "I'll be the DD today," because I would think back to class, I'd be like, "I can't possibly drink tonight. I want to be thinner." No, that's so cool. This is really cool. I feel like, you're the perfect person to speak on all this. I appreciate you being modest and, like, this isn't my specialty or whatever, but, when it comes to, like, the average Joe who has never had someone, like, talk to them about, an ingredient list or, how to read a nutrition label and be a skeptic, this is incredible information.
Mhm.
I grew up with a father who's a cardiologist, and when I could read, he was like, "Read this ingredient label," and, where it says ingredients, and I could only pronounce, like, a few words that I knew, and then I'd be like, "Dad, like, what is this 20-letter word?" And he's like, "Cool, if you can pronounce it, let's not eat it."
And most of those are just preservatives to allow that food to sit on the shelf for longer and increase profits.
Right, absolutely, and, like, theoretically, right, if you ever buy, like, 1 box of Twinkies your entire life and eat that, like, you're maybe not eating, um an excess amount to where, like, that could build up and, like, harm you, but they're in so much now that it's, like,
Yes,
it's
and
insane.
it's not to say that, like, with those things, you can't eat them, but
Right.
moderation is the key to everything, and variety is the spice of life. So keeping your diet balanced, mostly with whole foods, and eating those things that are treats, keep them treats.
Yeah.
A sweet treat is not a sweet treat if you have it every day.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Oh my god. I try not to keep anything so levels something that just, like, helped me so much because I didn't get to eat sweets, as you can imagine, no, does cardiologist bother? Didn't get to eat sweets a lot growing up, so when I became an adult, I remember I worked with a coach for the first time, not a dietitian, just someone who kind of assessed my macromolecules, like, what I'm consuming to make sure we could meet my, like, physical goals. She's like, "Dude, I've never had to not had to talk to a client about what they're eating." She's
Mhm.
like, "Have you ever tried a Rice Krispie treat?" I said, "Yeah." I haven't. She's like, "Well, you talk about getting lightheaded during your workouts because you have such a big break in your meal." She's like, "You should try one
Mhm.
before you lift." And I, like, got obsessed with Rice Krispie treats. They're a great simple carb if in moderation, but I became obsessed with them, and then I would have them at my house, and then I would stress eat them,
Mhm.
especially during my masters. I would just, like, be like, I'll work out later." Like, totally. Do you follow any, like, 80/20 rule? Like, do you do anything that, like, helps you?
My biggest thing is that willpower is a muscle. So if I have things around the house of that nature, I have to exercise that muscle every day when I pass those things, rather than when I go to the grocery store once a week, I only have to exercise that willpower muscle once
Mhm.
by not buying those things
Right.
and not tempting myself by not keeping them around.
Absolutely. Have you ever referred to them in levels of traction? Do you ever have
I
you
hadn't heard
yeah.
of this.
So my coach explained, she was like, if you buy ice cream for your home, all you have to do is go to your fridge, maybe have it defrosted. Some psychopaths don't do that. I believe in defrosting it. Anyway, moving on. Unless you're really hungry. Okay. But if you don't buy ice cream for your home, what you have to do then is either like have it now you can have it ordered to your house, which is like Jesus. But um before Instacart and, like, COVID, this was she told me, like, "You have to drive to the store, you then have to purchase the ice cream, you then have to bring it home." So it's like an extra level of traction to
Mhm.
acquiring the ice cream. Maybe that's going out and getting the ice cream. And so she was always like, "Increase your levels of tractions for those things that are so tempting. Make it harder for you to achieve that because we always wanna be at our, like, most least energetic state. So,
Mhm.
like, you probably won't wanna go out and get ice cream when you're craving it at, like, 9:30 to 10 p.m.
If you have to drive all the way to the store to get it, yes.
Exactly. So a level of traction thing it's totally changed my life. I'm trying to to decide if I should tell the story. My boyfriend like brought me a bunch of chocolate the other day because I was having a bad day, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Shit." No, I'm like, "Dude, thank you so much." I'm like, "Shit." Like these are now in my kitchen. I ate so many. I got so sick. They were so available, and so like I told him later. I was like, "Hey, I like flowers. Bring me flowers. I can't eat them when I'm stressed." And so that's something we talked about, and he was like, "I'm so sorry." I was like, "Don't be sorry. You brought me you did like the boyfriend thing,
Yeah.
but like it's too easy. I can't do it." But yeah, that's so cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, personally, I love, like, breakfast cereal,
Oh, nice.
but I know that I have 0 self-control with it. Like, if I buy a box of cereal, I will sit down with the box and the jug of milk and eat the whole thing.
They're intended for that.
So I just can't have it at the house.
What's your favorite?
Cinnamon Toast Crunch for sure.
Really?
Yes. which is just coated in sugar, but
It's so
it's
good.
delicious.
Oh my god. I found this bakery nearby that does I'm gluten-free out of preference. It's just
Mhm.
like the additives and a lot of people don't know about that. I get made fun of a lot for like being gluten-free. I'm like, it's not the gluten, dude. It's the additives, but like
Yes.
most people don't know that. So I just say gluten-free and then I just like, ah ha ha, yes, I know, I'm an idiot. Whatever, let's move on. But I found this bakery that makes this gluten-free bread that's like cinnamon. What I do
Mhm.
is I freeze it and it's really hard to cut. There's a
Yes.
level of traction. So I like put it when I want to eat it, I have to set it out for like 15 minutes. So
Mhm.
it's a super intentional decision to like then eat it. You can do stuff like that too, okay? You can make it work. Um, what do you currently do like in your everyday life? Like you said you did bodybuilding. Are you
Mhm.
currently still weightlifting? Like what do you
Yes, every day I
Nice.
train.
Okay.
I also do a lot of rucking.
Okay. Oh,
So
that's
it's
so
something
neat.
Joey and I do. Throw on a weight vest and walk. What I love about it is I do like to run,
Mhm.
but running is hard, and it's a lot of impact on my joints.
Yes.
So I can get just as tired from rucking,
Yeah.
and I only have to walk.
That's fantastic.
And one thing that I really struggle with is, there's different zones of exercise when you get
Yeah.
up to certain percentages of your max heart rate.
Right.
I have a really hard time of running slow.
Yeah.
When I run, my heart rate is, I'm pushing 85, 90% of my heart rate for the whole
Yes.
time.
Right.
And you should do some more zone 2 work, which is lowering to say 50, 45 to 65% of your max heart rate. So
Right.
when Joey and I are rucking, my heart rate stays around 130 the
Mhm.
whole time, and I can do that for hours.
That's fantastic. Ugh, I wanna do that more. I live in, like, one of the most beautiful places ever, and I don't venture out a lot because I one thing is, like, I choose to lift in the morning, and
Mhm.
sometimes I'm just, like, so tired, and I also do jujitsu, but, like, I am the most happy when I get outside and I get, vitamin D the natural way.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. That's so cool. Do you guys just, like do you just pack a backpack, or do you
I have a weighted vest that I wear.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Okay, super cool. That's awesome. Yeah, you guys just, like, ruck around do you have any more, like, outdoor spaces around
So
you?
Miami University actually has miles and miles of
Yeah.
outdoor nature areas. So they
Yeah.
have trails that I run and that we ruck. There's like 17 miles of those
Oh,
drills.
so
One day
nice.
back in August, Joey and I rucked a marathon. So
No shit.
yes, we rucked every inch of those trails.
That is how many miles?
26 miles,
Jesus
26.2.
Christ. I'm not gonna lie, I just actually opted out of Lena and I both we haven't written them yet. I don't know if we have what's it called? The dignity to do this, but I opted out of a half marathon. But the like running was taking so much from me, my other facets. Like the
Mhm.
impact on the joints is so real. I'm 28 and like you would think that like my mom's like, you should be able to run, in like a funny way. And I'm like, no, it's actually, like, really hurting my knees, it's hurting Lena's back and
Mhm.
hips, and we're like, "We need to do more sustainable work, we're preparing for the world shoot." So, like, I hope anyone listening, if you're experiencing that, it's very valid. It's a thing.
Yes, and the biggest thing with something like that is to start what we say is start low and go slow. So, well, the big thing that you feel like joint pain, things of
Mhm.
that nature, is you're trying to do too much too fast, and your body's not ready for it. So,
Absolutely.
ease yourself into it. Start with a mile at a time or 2 miles at a time, and then work up to that half marathon. Don't hop off the couch
Mhm.
and try to run 10 miles because you're gonna feel it for the next couple weeks, and that'll be a deterrent from you continuing to do that exercise.
That's such a big point. Yeah, doing what you love, but the opposite is true. If you, like, harm yourself, you'll associate that
Mhm.
exercise very negatively and not wanna do it more, so that's gosh, such a this is such a great conversation.
And I think a big barrier to people starting exercise
Yeah.
is when you first start weightlifting, that soreness lasts for so long.
Oh my
And
god.
so if you start lifting and you get sore, and so you don't work out when you're sore,
Yeah.
and then you push your next lift to a week away or 2 weeks away, and then
Mhm.
you get just as sore the next time.
Yeah.
Versus starting a little bit slower, not getting so sore that you can't move, and
Mhm.
continuing to lift, and what you'll notice is that that soreness starts to go away,
Yeah.
or it's not near as impactful
And is
on
that
life.
just lactic acid or what else? What other
So,
things?
lactic lactate gets a bad name.
Right, it
Um,
does.
so what's great about lactate is, we're gonna get really technical here
Okay.
on metabolism, but there's a pathway, where glucose enters your cells, and it goes through something called glycolysis, which
Mhm,
is where the glucose, which is a 6 carbon molecule,
mhm,
gets broken down into 2 3 carbon molecules called
mhm,
pyruvate. And through that process, we can generate, depending on where that initial glucose came from,
mhm,
either 2 or 3 molecules of ATP, which
mhm.
is the molecule that we use for energy.
Right.
So the fate of pyruvate, it either goes into the citric acid cycle, which is the oxidative phosphorylation. That's where you make the most ATP,
Yeah.
or it can be turned into lactate. So what's great about that lactate portion is it allows us to approach high intensity exercise, because if you think about, there's 3 metabolic systems that we use to create energy, and they're differentiated based on time scale. scale. So
Right.
the first one is our phosphocreatine system,
Mhm.
which is where that's like if you were to get up off this chair and sprint, you're using all PCR. So that's, somewhere between 8 and 10 seconds of work.
Mhm.
And then that store is eliminated. And that's actually where creatine supplementation comes in. What you're doing is you're increasing the amount of creatine in the muscle, which can be bound to that ATP.
Mhm.
And then the phosphocreatine breaks that phosphate molecule off, and it creates energy that way. And so you might be able to get, say you had 8 to 10 seconds of work you were able to do prior to creatine supplementation. When you supplement, you might be able to get 9 to 11. So it gives you just that little bit of extra boost. And
Right.
actually, what's happening, why you seem to get stronger and things of that nature, is it's not the creatine itself, it's how hard it allows you to train. So
Mm.
with that supplement of creatine,
Mhm.
you might be able to get one more rep, or
Mhm.
you might be able to do one more sprint. And that added effect over the course of your training is what's making you stronger or bigger.
Absolutely.
So once you get past that phosphocreatine system, that's when we move into glycolysis, which is the next system. And that moves from somewhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes.
Mhm.
So the oxidative phosphorylation system, which is in your mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell,
Mhm.
that it has a bit of a lag to get going.
Right.
And so that glycolysis system picks up that slack
Mhm.
of, if you start running, first you're going to use your phosphocreatine, then you're going to use glycolysis, and then you'll start to feel that burn in your muscles, and then it'll start to go away once that lactate is cleared
Right.
and the oxidative phosphorylation sort of picks up. But if we didn't have lactate,
Mhm.
you would never even be able to approach that intensity
Right.
because the pyruvate would have nowhere to go.
Right.
And lactate can actually be used as fuel by a lot of different cells in the body. So red blood cells actually prefer lactate as their source of energy. The brain is a big dump for lactate as well. Cardiomyocytes, the muscle cells in your heart,
Mhm.
they love to use lactate as a fuel source. So lactic acid is not bad. It's
Right.
all context dependent.
Right.
What's making you sore is inflammation. So you get micro tears, little damage in your muscle,
Mhm.
and that causes fluid buildup. So the macrophages that come in, that inflammation, it draws fluid in, and then it's actually stretching the fascia, which is the tissue that surrounds your muscle,
Mhm.
and that's where you're feeling that pain, is because there's a lot of pressure in there.
Right.
So the way that you can get rid of that, one of the best ways is movement,
Mhm.
because by contracting that muscle, you're pumping that fluid out of it, and it can
Right.
help that soreness go away.
Absolutely. Even though it's like just the last thing you wanna do.
Yes.
And I definitely don't do that thing where I, like, take breaks from the gym and then go back, then I'm like, "Holy shit, why did I take a break?" And dude, the same thing happens in jujitsu. This is, like, kind of off topic. If you do jujitsu, you know what I'm talking about. You'll take a break and, like, if you do gi jujitsu,
Mhm.
you lose that,
The
like
calluses on your fingers,
dude,
yeah.
it's the calluses and, like, it's almost like you're utilizing muscles in your hands and your wrists and your forearm that you don't normally, and it can be such a deterrent. Like, my guy and I have trouble when we take breaks from jujitsu, when we travel or do anything. It's really hard to wanna go back because 'cause we're
Mhm.
like, "It's gonna be so fucking painful." But that first I always tell my friends and family, like, I have a good support system. I'll call and be like, "Dude, I've taken a break. I'm scared to get back in the gym." And we always try to validate and remind, like, as much as you can understand the kind of like the biochemical pathways that support this inflammation and this
Mhm.
pain, as much as you may understand it, it's really hard to, like, wanna go back into this, like, pain, but get past those first few days back and, like, it's more like the week. I don't know about you. It's, now at my age now, it's like a week for me to,
Mhm.
like, get through the pain and, like, push.
What I've always told my clients is it's 1,000 times harder to restart than
Mhm.
it was to start at the beginning
Ah,
because you know what's coming.
yes,
You know that
right?
pain that's coming in the first week. And so
Gosh,
mentally, you just don't want to go through that again. But if you
absolutely.
stay consistent and you stay in it, you don't have to worry about that.
Right. It's such a double-edged sword, but
Mhm.
ultimately the consistency is everything. Gosh, that's so cool. And on a mental note, I think this episode is very naturally and awesomely coming to like a very cool close here, and there has to be a part two. I'm gonna listen to this and I'm gonna be like, oh my god, there's so much I want to go into with you. There's a big kind of like what I've seen a lot of fitness influencers talk on is like motivation versus discipline.
Mhm.
Is there anything you want to speak to on that difference? And
Well, you can't
well,
you can't you can't rely on motivation
right.
because it's fleeting. So discipline, I think it was Mike Tyson who said discipline is doing something you hate but doing it like you love it. And so just staying consistent, and if you lift, you don't have to go in there and lift. I think it's Greg Doucette who says harder than last time every time you
Mhm.
go in. It doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
Not all of us are trying to be pro bodybuilders. We're just trying to stay healthy. So going in and doing something, keeping that habit of going into the gym is so important in keeping you consistent.
I love that. That's wonderful. Something I love to ask guest speakers before we ever end an episode is like what you would like to leave them with. What's like your, especially from what we've talked about and just like your personal motivations. What might you want to leave listeners with, if you don't mind?
What I'll say is, I think I've said them both so far, but the two things. anything is better than nothing.
Mhm.
So whether you're not doing anything right now or you are doing something, if you are doing something, keep doing it. If you're not doing something, find something that you like to do and do that. If it's walking, it's walking. If it's pickleball, it's pickleball. The next thing is, the best exercise is the one you'll do. We see so much in our culture about optimizing. I want to have the optimal morning routine, or I want my exercise selection for my lift to be perfect. But in reality, those variables have such a little impact compared to your consistency and doing something that you enjoy. So don't lose the forest for the trees. Take a broader approach to your exercise. Don't try to hyper optimize everything, because you'll just drive yourself crazy. And am I doing the perfect bicep curl? Are you curling? If you want big biceps, do curls.
Right,
If you want big legs, do squats.
right.
It doesn't really matter if you're doing a Cossack squat or a hack squat or a back squat. Do some sort of squat.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, I love it. Thank you so much. This is so
Absolutely.
cool. I sometimes feel like I don't get to do this as much. I don't get to talk to people who are in these professions, but at the end of the day, it is like defensive self first and then self defense. And yeah, I love the like do what you love. Jiu-jitsu is a good example too. Sorry, I
Mhm.
keep going back. This is
No,
random.
I
You're
like
like you're
jujitsu.
like, oh you do. Do you do jujitsu?
Yes.
No shit. Like currently?
No, the gym that I was training at closed down,
Oh,
so I'm
I'm
not able
so
to right now.
sorry.
But when
That's
I
so
when I
bad.
move, I'm planning on picking it back up.
That's so exciting. I'm sorry it closed down. Did you have a good family and everything
We
there?
did, yeah. But it was such a small, so it was a satellite school of one that
Okay.
was, I think, their center, like where they're located, is like an hour away.
Yeah.
And so they had one instructor who was driving out there 2 nights a week.
Oh gosh.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it was a pain. So
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you to get back. Do you mind if I ask like how long you've been in it?
I was training consistently for about 2.5 years before it shut down.
Fantastic. Were you able to do get any ranks with an assistant? Or?
I got a couple stripes on my
There
belt,
you
but
go.
I was a little too inconsistent with how much I had to be in the lab to do anything. Yeah,
Listen,
drastic.
I am one of those like I've dropped blue belt dropout. Like I got my blue belt and then I disappeared. I technically got a nose surgery and I had to wait a
Mhm,
little while because I'd broken it from Muay Thai and years of that. But yeah, it's when you go back, you're gonna go through that like, oh
mhm,
my God, my fingers hurt and like all these different pains. But hopefully you'll find a school that like keeps you coming back. The
mhm.
community is incredible and all that.
And that's big, whether it's a jujitsu gym or a regular gym.
Yeah.
The community aspect is so important, keeping you accountable, and you have fun when you're in there. That's the most important part. If you're dreading the gym, you're never gonna go. But if
Yeah.
you have people that you like to be around and you see them at the gym, it's gonna keep you in there.
It's so great. I'm so glad I have this gym I have. I get to train with like some of my like shooter friends and everything. And like if I don't show up, sometimes Alyssa will be like, I haven't seen you in the gym. And I'm like, well shit. I need to show up now. Like I don't want to get that text again. But it's always like it's always funny. She'll be like, I didn't see you this morning. I'm like, I know it's because I didn't go. I'll go later, So the community is very big. So I love that.
Absolutely,
That's so
because
cool.
I ruck with Joey.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have rucked 90% of the miles that I have if I
Yes.
wasn't doing it with him. It's kind of
Absolutely.
boring to just walk around for hours unless I've got somebody who doesn't shut up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so fucking funny. He said he's gonna listen to this on the plane. If you didn't, if you actually did, Joey, if you listened this far, then you need to text both of us right now and say like, "Haha, I listened this far." We'll put him to the test to see if
Yes,
we won't tell him about this. But thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, Jackson. This is
absolutely.
incredibly insightful. I've been lucky enough to have support from like my parents all the way to my educational system, but so much of this is just not talked about. So I appreciate you being a
Yeah.
resource. And where can people find you? Holy shit! Can we talk about your pasta page? Can we talk about
Okay, so we can talk
Yes.
about that. I'm not doing it anymore. That was a bet with a friend.
Mhm.
So I think the page is still out there.
It
It's
is.
I
I
eat
follow
spag
it.
on Instagram. So I got into an argument 2 Decembers ago with a friend about whether or not a grown man should eat spaghetti.
Okay.
I love spaghetti.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the argument, I said the phrase, I could eat spaghetti every day. And he said, I bet you can't. And so the bet that we had was that whether or not I could eat spaghetti every day for the year of 2025, and the loser was going to have to get a tattoo of spaghetti. And so I ate spaghetti every day up until about mid-September, which is when he texted me. He saw the writing on the wall. Granted, when we got into this bet, all of my friends were like, "You have no idea who you're dealing with. This guy signed up to be in school for the rest of his life. He's gonna do this." And so he saw the writing on the wall in September, and he texted me, and he's like, "How much do I have to pay you
No
to get out of
shit.
this bet?"
Okay.
So for I won't tell you how much money, but he did pay me to get out of the bed, so I stopped eating spaghetti.
That's so
But you can
funny.
go to that Instagram page and watch me eat 300 bowls of spaghetti.
So funny.
But if you want to find nutritional advice or fitness advice, the Practical Shooting and Training Library (PSTL), we'll have some programs coming out there very soon.
Absolutely, and that's Joey founded this to create a kind of like She Shield, but, like, in a much larger and more, like, technical way, a place where people can come on and talk about their expertise. I'll be on there as well talking about concealed carry, so I'm excited to see that come out. Is there anywhere else people can find you? Any, like
I am off social
There
media
you go.
just for, my own sake.
Good for you.
But if you hop on PubMed and search my name, you can see my papers that'll be coming out in the future.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jackson.
Yep.
Definitely just had a mini stroke. We'll talk about it better, but I appreciate you. This has been awesome.
Absolutely.